Welcome, artists, artists, and art appreciators to Art of Lore. In this video, I'll be making a digital 3D model inspired by concept art drawn by an amazing artist who is also here on YouTube named Savannah Alexandra Art. The drawings I've done here of the profile and front of a Centaur character are directly based on the Frostine design from Savannah Alexandra's recent video. Well, it was a while ago. This video was supposed to come out in December. So now it's been like 2 months. But it's called Let's Look at My parentheses failed and parentheses toy pitch. In it, she describes pitching a series called Centaur, Protectors of the Veil to the company Spin Master. Sadly, it was rejected, so she put the concept art out on YouTube and her whole pitch, maybe to garner more interest. Since she sells her own artwork, I imagine she might make prints of the characters and things like that if people are interested. I'll talk a bit more about her in a minute after I talk about what I'm doing for this video. This design 100% belongs to her, not claiming it as my own. I did ask in the comments if I can make a model based on it, and she said yes, so hopefully she's all good with this video. I did clarify in a second comment that I wanted to make it a video, but I don't know if she saw that. Anyways, the first thing that I'm doing is just making essentially a draft of the whole body to match the proportions of the sketch in 3D. This is done using super simple shapes, like cubes basically, and using the subdivision modifier to smooth them out visually. This is just a lot of method that a lot of people use. You can kind of think of it like taking a square block of clay and smoothing it out using water or something like that, if you want to think about a physical medium. As a note, I know that more recently Savannah did a live stream where she discusses some possible redesigns, but I started this before that, so I'm going off base the original design document she showed in her first video. In addition to referencing Savannah Alexandra's art, I had been using Monster High and Rainbow High dolls as references for sort of the shape of the body. I think the body type I was thinking of most as a goal was Monster High G3 Draculaura, because the modern Monster High dolls have a less bowed back, and she's got that sort of pear-shaped body and thicker legs. The legs of the Centaur characters have this really nice chunky stylization that's almost reminiscent of My Little Ponies or something like that, which is for sure why I really like these characters. If you've been following along with my Takara pony journey, you probably know that my big sister Takara ball-jointed doll has chunky feet, hooves, and a pear-shaped body with proportionally smaller arms, but she's more like a minotaur than a centaur because of her pony head. But that's pretty much why I decided I really wanted to try making the Centaur character into a 3D model, just because I did that with my other anthropomorphic models as well. Is the Centaur anthropomorphic? I don't know. You get it. Before I move on to making the individual limbs and refining everything, I decided to start by adjusting the face a little bit because it was getting to me how creepy it was looking. I had originally just made it out of these very cubey shapes, trying to get a feel for the main shapes on the face, but that just looked a little weird. I decided to make essentially a draft of what the face could look like, keeping in mind that I will adjust it later. I figured this would just give me a better idea of how the body fit the head, but it does look really weird for a while. A thing I realized when I was doing this face is that I haven't really sculpted any digital 3D model faces, for dolls or anything else. I wanted to try this project because it's similar to my big sister Takara, but her head is just a pony, like I said. And I did do the Kenner Shimmer Centaur, but I added very little detail. And I made the other phases in this 12-day series, but the mini doll didn't have very much detail, and the Usul is an anther character. So they're not really like applicable. So it feels like this is like a whole new skill that I'm experimenting with here that I like didn't even think about. Because my brain was focused on the horse part. Keeping that in mind, this was kind of difficult. I was happy enough with the mouth and nose, especially for a first draft, but I went through a lot of iteration, both recorded and not, most of which isn't included in this video, because I just spent so much time changing it to try and make it as good as possible, literally fiddling with it until the moment I gave up and started editing the video. And then a little bit after, because I was sick, so I couldn't record this. So now I'm finally recording it, and hopefully it's done. The draft feels a little alien right now, but to be fair, let's not pretend modern doll lines with their giant eyes and tiny noses don't also look a little bit alien. I think I did put the eyes too close together, but then a lot of designs have eyes that are really far apart, which I don't really like. Like the Rainbow High and LOMG dolls have like those very flat faces with those eyes far apart. But yeah, since I'm not a professional toy designer, I haven't tried to interpret someone else's art this way, and I didn't really know how far to go like off design. I know that concept art rarely matches the exact final product, so I don't know how much to take literally, so I guess I just tried to take everything as literally as possible when trying to design this, but that means it was kind of hard to design the eyes because, I don't know, I felt like they were very large for a very literal translation, if that makes sense. Now that I have a draft of the head and body, I'm going to go through and create each piece of the doll separately. There are 3 arm pieces, 3 of each leg, so 9 pieces total for the limbs, and then they're mirrored to the other side of the body. Then the body pieces are the horse torso, the human torso, and the chest, and that's 3 more, and the head. So that's a total of 13 unique pieces, plus the tail and the antlers, because this doll is also a reindeer. So those are all the pieces that I'm gonna make, one at a time. The articulation in my version with all of these pieces is based off of Savannah Alexandra's version with the most articulation. So she gave multiple examples of how many joints the character could theoretically have. So my sketch is based off if it were a ball-jointed doll, which is what I have the most familiarity with, and it would have quite a lot of joints, just because, I mean, those kind of typically do, and an elastic strong ball-jointed doll is a bit simpler than a factory-made doll with snap-in joints. At least I think it is. It is in my brain. But they're made out of different materials, so I don't know. I did not complete the articulation and hollowing out of the body for the doll, so what you see on screen will just essentially have, like, balls floating in place in the socket, with no apparent, I mean, there's no elastic to connect them because this is digital. But honestly, I didn't want to hollow everything out and do that step because I'm not planning on printing it or providing it for anyone else. Unless Savannah Alexandra wants it, I could complete the joints for her, but that seems a little presumptuous. And I wouldn't provide it to anyone else because it's not my design. So this prototype is more like a visual 3D guide as opposed to like a working prototype because you would have to add in those joints. I am trying my best to interpret her art into a 3D model, but I'm not an expert in toy making, and this was proposed for an industry that like I don't really have any familiarity with. I imagine a toy designer would probably go through a lot of iterations of things like joints and what is most practical, and there would have to be a lot of testing. I just felt like this would be a really good challenge for me. I mean, even with my own dolls, I feel like I can't do the level of testing that I would prefer because I don't have a 3D printer. So I can only imagine that if, you know, you worked in the industry making these consistently, you would spend a lot of time making drafts and things. And I figured that making this could at least draw some more eyes to her project. I know I don't have very many followers, but I don't know. Maybe it'll seem interesting to people, just in case you don't know her. And while I'm working on these pieces, I wanted to go into this toy concept a little. I want to talk about Spin Master, but first I'm going to talk about the creator of these designs, Savannah Alexandra art. I have followed Savannah Alexandra art for years and years, although I only found out about her YouTube channel like a few months ago. more than a few months ago at this point, but still, in the last like 6 months. For example, this is my Draw This in Your Style from 2019 on Instagram, which is where I think I originally followed her. So that's how long I've admired her art, but I probably hadn't seen her YouTube channel because it's only been around for a couple of years and I stopped using Instagram around 2021. I'm always really happy finding people and artists I follow on platforms around the internet. I feel like as I become less active on sites and everything, you know, I lose a lot of people that I was following, but especially because platforms like Instagram don't really show you the people that you follow anymore. So like that's why I stopped using it in the first place, is because it wasn't really consistently showing me all of the artists that I follow. So I lost track of them. Savannah Alexandra also did a video on the Fantasia style Kenner Shimmer doll. This was before my video where I did something similar, but she customized an actual 1980s Kenner Shimmer, whereas I sculpted mine, and so mine's a lot rougher. Anyways, I think I didn't find her video because I had worked on it for a long time before my video came out. The doll for a long time before my video came out. So I probably searched the topic like near the beginning of the design process and not the end of the process. Otherwise, I would have found her probably a little bit earlier. I actually didn't realize that she worked in the toy industry at the time I saw her YouTube channel, but apparently she does freelance work, like for Spin Master, in addition to being an independent artist. She has a Ko-fi and a shop where she sells things like prints and pins and stickers, and she has a lot of cute character designs like the puppets and Mermagica, and her designs are very like retro and pinup inspired, but include a lot of diversity from like skin tone and body type diversity, and also just like really unique and cute personalities. And I believe has like stories about the puppets. I remember a while ago reading her like webtoon where she wrote about the puppets storyline. You may not be familiar with Spin Master even if you follow doll lines, because they are not Mattel or MGA, creators of the big name lines like Barbie and Bratz, respectively. Between them, they also have Monster High, Ever After High, Enchantables, Na Na Na, LOL Surprise, Lolo Loopsy, and so on. Those would encapsulate like pretty much most of the fashion dolls that I regularly hear about nowadays, except for like the Magic Mixies by Moose Toys. And I only know them because Cami from Darling Dolls talks about them a lot. While I was working on this video, I found this book called Spin Master, the first 20 years at Half Price Books, and tucked in between the pages was like a personalized letter from the founders to whoever in the book. And I would have really liked to keep that. I mean, the book is like 10 years old now, but it was in really good condition, and I would have bought it, but it was like $30, which is probably the price that it is new. But anyways, that was a fun find. I flipped through it a bit, but I was there for Christmas gifts, not books on toy companies, so. Anyways, Spin Master's most popular toy lines aren't fashion dolls, but they do a lot of licensed toys, and they own brands like Zuzu Pets and Hatchimals, and now Paw Patrol. But they also aren't strangers to fashion dolls. They made Live Dolls in 2009 to 2012, which was a highly articulated fashion doll with inset eyes, which was years before Rainbow High was like given all of the attention for having pretty much those same features. And around that time, they also produced the La-Di-Da dolls, and then they also produced like Lil Charmers, I think it was. They made Mermaid High during the High craze, and they now have Unicorn Academy. Unicorn Academy is not entirely a fashion line, but it's based off a children's book and has an accompanying show, and it includes like posable figures of the characters and their pet unicorns. So on one hand, the Centaur idea fits pretty well with their repertoire because we know that they have experience with like a wide variety of fashion dolls, from like the more gimmicky, trendy lines to like the high quality, high articulation lines. But I guess on the other hand, they're already doing a brand like Unicorn Academy targeted at horse girls, so maybe they didn't want to invest in a competing like Centaur line. I guess potentially competing. I don't know. I'm not in the industry. I'm just speculating. But I think that Centaura is really unique in like the toy aisle, so that's a bit sad. I feel like it's a bit more like magically than just horses, so it would be really interesting. The designs are pretty complex, and a lot of toy design I know is limited by the price of creating unique molds for characters and the cost of complexity, especially on smaller dolls with their tiny clothes. I think that's what Savannah Alexandra was talking about in her newer live stream about, like, maybe simplifying the designs or something like that, which is unfortunate because I like the, you know, high level of complexity, but it is true that sort of the fashion doll industry seems to go through like waves of developing more detailed and complicated dolls and then sort of scaling them back until people are like, we want nicer dolls again, I guess is what I've noticed. There's like a really clear example for Monster High dolls because in the early 2010s, they were some of the first dolls that had like very consistent articulation. They had a lot of unique face and limb molds. Like Claudine the werewolf had like ears, and Laguna was like a fish character, so she had fins on her hands. And nowadays, like, so many play dolls have joints in their elbows and hands. And like most of the Barbies and Bratz I had growing up had stick straight arms or arms at 90-degree angles. And some of them they could bend their knees, but that was it. So Monster High didn't like pioneer extra joints. And the Live dolls by Spin Master did them a year earlier. But they were definitely like higher quality than most of the dolls on the market at the time. And that seemed to be partially why they're so successful and why so many people, like, why they're so successful on YouTube too, with like customizing them. The reboot, the Generation 2 reboot of Monster High, was largely disliked by people who were a fan of them for their articulation. They removed that. They had cheaper, thin printed clothes and everything. And then now they're kind of going back to those former high quality dolls, lots of articulation, more body types now. I'm usually not into Monster High dolls, but there's a new Venus McFlytrap, which is like a fly trap themed monster doll. They really got away from doing like normal monsters like werewolves, and they have all sorts of weird stuff now. But I mean, she's existed in the line forever, but she has ones with like an afro now and overalls, and she looks so good. I love pink and green color schemes together. So I think that's very fun. So yeah, anyways, all I was saying, Monster High's in an upswing. Rainbow High, who, like I said, articulation through the roof, inset eyes, that one's in like a downswing right now. I don't know what that means in terms of like the state of the industry at all. This was just a tangent about various doll lines. But there's a lot of like nuance, I guess, that goes in to what gets put on shelves and like what gets accepted by companies, I'm sure. So it is sad that Savannah Alexandra's concept was sort of rejected, but that doesn't mean that it's like a bad idea or that it maybe in some other time, in some other timeline, it could exist still. Maybe right now is just not the right time that people were seeing, you know, those trends in the market that just aren't looking towards horse girls. In my Fantasia video last year, I did some research on Playline Centaurs, and the only ones besides Kenner Shimmers that I found at the time were Monster High dolls. They have Aviatrata, their Frightmares line. I didn't talk about them much other than saying I didn't really like them. I did find out later about something called the Princess Prancers, which is a line that might not even been produced, but looks like if you took a Bratz doll and put it on top of like a My Little Pony, it doesn't look very good. I don't know if it was ever produced or if it was just shown off at a toy fair. It's like the dark version of Centaur. the bad timeline version, I guess. But I don't think that it's been successfully produced or something. I don't know. You can barely find any information about them on the internet, and I didn't even find them when I did all of this research. One thing I didn't really talk about much in that video was the clothes on those lines, and I think that one of the things about Centaura is that Savannah put in clearly so much effort into making the dolls like make sense as fashion dolls instead of just, you know, being a centaur. Like Aviatrotter's outfit is mostly just a little jacket, and then she's got some like vinyl harness on. And I get what they're going for there, but I just don't really think it was like that interesting. I mean, I guess this is just a very literal interpretation of what would like a horse human wear. Whereas like the sort of leather belt aesthetic is kind of similar to the Centaur girl who's like very gothic, but in her case she has like this gothic aesthetic, so like it matches the horse part and her overall aesthetic, whereas like Avia Trotter doesn't seem that gothic except for in the sense that she's a Monster High doll, and they're all kind of like, you know, they all got that gothic twist, but I don't know. I just think it's really interesting to expand the horse clothes past just being basic, like, saddle, bridle things and doing all of the, like, fun trims and everything. I don't even know what the saddle blankets, is that what they're called? As saddle blankets. But yeah, that would be so fun to play with. So yeah, it's just a really unique idea. I also wanted to mention in the comments of that video, and I think on Savannah's video about these, a lot of people talk about the Antu blind box Centaur dolls, which are ball-jointed blind box dolls. They're ball-jointed dolls with like plastic hair, but kind of in like a chibi style. Their horse half is the same color as their like human half, and they're articulated in the same, I think, amount of joints. Oh no, they don't have the hooves. They don't have articulated hooves, but they do have like articulated knees and essentially like hips, and their little hands are articulated too. And they are very cute. I don't go for blind boxes. I've heard good things about the quality of the company, but I do think their prices are suspiciously low for what they're offering. I don't know, I suppose the people purchasing multiple blind boxes makes up the price, which is a business model that is quite common in the toy industry right now, and just not one that I'm a huge fan of, personally. They do have clothes, but it's kind of just dresses that cover their horse half. They didn't really attempt to, like, bring the horse into it. By the way, I started putting timestamps throughout this video when I could. I only really have the timestamps because I did a digital recording. I'm not sure if people find the timestamps interesting. The final recording of me finishing the face had about 2 hours of just doing that, and there was a lot of other time off screen where I was fiddling with stuff, so in total it was about 10 hours of recording. But I guess I want to show the times when possible, especially for these longer projects, to give a more accurate view of just how long a video like this takes, both to record and to edit it. My recordings just for this file totaled 10 hours and 46 minutes, and it was recorded over like 3 days. I should probably keep better track of how long I do stuff outside of Blender, like in real life, and also how much I do outside of recording in Blender, because I did hours of polishing. And this is not like a brag. It's an embarrassing fact that I'm incapable of focusing on anything else if I have a project that I'm working on. I am not an expert in 3D modeling. I'm fairly new to it. I'm not the fastest, but this is just a reminder that stuff like this takes time. I'm still practicing, I'm still learning, but the first step in learning is kind of scary because you look at like people who are kind of already experienced with something and you wonder how they get everything done in any amount of time, but especially so fast on the internet. There's so much short form content out there where people squeeze like bigger and bigger projects into like 20 minutes, 10 minutes, 1 minute long videos, and it can feel really disheartening when you're trying to learn because things just take such a long time to get through like one thing. And meanwhile, it feels like everyone's speeding through things. But like, no, like, you know, people will do 20 hours of work and put it in a 1 minute video. And it's very hard to recognize how that 20 hours of work would really feel when you're doing it. So I guess that's why I was thinking about trying to do timestamps for more things. I guess let me know how you feel about including estimates of working time below, if it changes anything, or if it's just kind of annoying to be on screen. I'm going to leave you with some music while I do some sculpting for a little bit, and then we'll reconvene once the sculpting is all complete and we have all the details together. Now, this isn't a reveal, but this is a jump scare. Not as bad as the jump scare I did with my Takara doll. I will be doing the reveal at the end of this section, so if you want to skip to the reveal, you gotta skip this part. Earlier in the video, I mentioned that I wouldn't be providing this model because it's a design by an independent artist who might want to pursue getting this made. I'm just doing this because I like her art. While I was working on this though, I really wanted to make a fully articulated centaur that I could someday print. So I have this other model. I also made and I provided online the Kenner Shimmer Centaur. Obviously, this is also not directly my design, but it was discontinued a long time ago. It's not an indie artist, and I have made changes to it, like sculpting on the chest and the fur around the waist. I modified the Kenner Shimmer Centaur doll so she's articulated in a similar way to how Savannah Centaurs and the Antu blind box Centaurs are. I had to heavily modify the doll to make her hooves flat on the ground. I didn't articulate the hooves because I just don't want to mess with the sculpting. She's kind of like a baby or chibi, and I tried to match the like 80s style of the eyes and face while giving it a little more detail for this version. So this is the mock-up of my Kenner Centaurette as a ball-jointed doll, so I can show you how I construct the joints. But to finalize the joints, I use a difference boolean to cut out the sockets and then a union boolean separately to merge the balls on the parts that have balls and sockets respectively. The balls will be held in the sockets by an elastic string. It's basically just held in by tension, and the joint will still be able to freely rotate, and I can adjust either the ball or socket portion to reduced movement when hinging. For example, I don't want the elbow to face backwards, so I bring the area behind the elbow down lower than the front of the elbow. In order to allow ball joints to hinge, there needs to be space for the elastic to spin around essentially without creating a strain on it. If the elastic is strained more tightly than it normally is, the limb will sort of snap back into the default position. So you basically make a slice out in the direction that they're supposed to hinge. With the addition of the rotation of the limbs, you get quite a lot of movement. So they can hinge back and forth and they can spin around. So when I lift the shoulder, the elastic will maintain the same position and the friction between the pieces should hold the pose. The elbow and then the bottom of the legs need an additional bar across them, so the elastic can be attached to either some sort of small S hook, or sometimes people just use string. I have the habit of putting the bar too close to the edge of the hand or other limb, but for full flexibility, the bar needs to be at the center of the sphere, which means the cutout needs to go very deep into whatever limb it is. Hopefully I get to test out this concept to see if my horse centaur body plan will work out. I'm really happy with how the whole thing turned out, but especially the stylized hooves and the hoof fluff. I struggled a little with matching the face perfectly, but I think the texture painting that I did to match the example as best as possible helps show off the sculpting and how it would look more. The hair, not as good as I would have preferred, and it did cast more shadow on the face than I would like, but I'm still learning Blender's hair tool, and I couldn't figure out how to do flipped up hair in the time allotted at least, so I just kind of gave up on that and made the hair curly, so that's just me being bad at Blender, don't mind me. Her outfit is super cute and detailed. I love her little pet, and I really want to model the pet, but I just had to cut myself off somewhere, and like doing the joints and the pet would have been too much. It was too much. The eyes, of course, are supposed to be inset, and like the hooves and antlers are supposed to be like glittery and transparent, but it's just more difficult for me to do those kind of like transparent objects and make them look good, so they're just painted on right now. So I think Savannah Alexandra Centaur pitch would make such a unique line of dolls. It's already clear I like them since you can look at this video's runtime. You can tell she put a ton of effort into thinking of what centaurs would wear as a fashion line. The centaurs wear jackets and matching leg warmers and carousel style body decor made of like straps and ribbons, and like Nara has cool pants. I think Nara is my favorite design, and I'm not just saying that because Last Unicorn is on her inspiration board, but I ended up doing Frostine because this was meant to be December themed and like winter themed. I mean, it's still winter, so at least where I am. As well as the designs representing different environments and cultures and styles, and as potential someday ecologist, crossing my fingers, I always appreciate when toys have some messages about the environment. Like, kids are going to play with toys either way, so why not include positive messages? And also positive magical messages, because everyone loves magic. So anyways, I hope you have a nice day. Thank you to my Ko-fi supporters, Retro Geek Crafts, Luca, and Zero. Goodbye!